Well, after 7 long years of Chiron's transit in Aries, the sign of I am, where questions around personal integrity, authority, the right to live, the right to be here, whether we are worthwhile as people, whether we feel safe in our body, all of those wounds that have activated and hopefully healed in many ways are about to shift from fiery Aries, questions around motivation and drive as well, into the earth sign of Taurus. And of course, it falls on the heels of a long 7-year Uranus transit through Taurus as well. Chiron will enter Taurus on June 19th of this month, and it'll stay there until September 18th. So it's just giving us a little bit of a dip. Then it'll return to do its final cleanup job in Aries, only to return for good to Taurus on the 14th of April of next year, 2027. And then it'll be there until the 19th of July, 2033. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm an integrative psychotherapist. I've been doing that a couple decades. And I'm also a Hellenistic astrologer, making YouTube videos on concrete self-healing tools that align with the astrological transits. What's interesting is that Chiron in Taurus is actually basically returning to where the place of its discovery in 1977. So we haven't had Chiron in terms of knowing about this asteroid between Saturn and Uranus for very long at all, 49 years, 48 years. And it was discovered at 3 degrees of Taurus. And his cycle is roughly around 50 years. So in 2027, 28, we're actually going to have like the Chiron return to its original place of its own birth chart. And as I'm sure you know, Chiron represents deep intrapsychic injuries to our ego. And I mean the ego in a very positive way, because we need intrapsychic ego states to function in the world as part of incarnating into a physical body. But our earliest experiences, our past life experiences, the karma we bring into this incarnation, they all carry with them what we now kind of archetypally speak about as a chironic wound. Chiron as an asteroid was not known about in the ancient world. This isn't an archetype that we've worked with for very long. And yet its symbolism and its impact in the chart really is undeniable. So it's important to remember that Chiron is just as much, if not, and even more so, about healing as it is wounding, and around facing kind of those existential questions around okayness, safety, security, belonging, abandonment, rejection, the need for approval, the need for love and connection, and the need to be, part of the group and included. All that has really been at the surface for most of us, regardless of where your Chiron placement is located in your own natal chart. So you've probably noticed as Chiron has been in the last decan of Aries, and in this anaretic degree of 28, 29, really bringing any unresolved injuries to our sense of really being safe, secure, and enough in the world, as it then goes into the sign associated with material security. In modern astrology, you often hear people talk about self-worth. That is not how ancient people across Egypt, India, Mesopotamia, the Greek-speaking Hellenistic world, because the ancient symbolism was more about tangible assets, material goods, and resources. So this can be related to self-worth in so much as that is related to the worth that we ascribe to ourselves by virtue of what we possess, of what we own, of what we have, of how much food we have, of how we feel in our physical bodies, of what those bodies look like. So in that way, self-worth is connected, but it's really about those tangible assets, resources, and material experiences. And you can see this bleed over from Chiron and Aries into Chiron and Taurus on the heels of Uranus doing a 7-year transit in Taurus, really kind of prepping us and laying the groundwork, unfortunately, for fears and old wounds to come up around money, around food, around scarcity of resources. Look at what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz and how it's impacting the resources available and the cost of things around the world, not to mention tariffs, et cetera, and all the things that have really, amplified in the last few years around access to basic needs. So Taurus, at the end of the day, focuses on the simple and the mundane, not in a lesser way, but in a way of, what are we actually materially concerned with on a day-to-day basis? When it comes to survival, will we be okay? Will we be okay? Will we make it? And what I want to emphasize is not to inflame, like, are we going to make it? We won't survive. No, it's to simply acknowledge that our limbic system with Uranus and Gemini already kind of revving up the nervous system, making our minds go faster. The energy is actually very, very quick now with Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini. It's that sense of mental ungroundedness and fears, subconscious, multi-generational trauma related, ancestral trauma related. If you belong to a racial or ethnic group that is oppressed, that is historically marginalized and oppressed, all of those core woundings, not just about identity, Aries, but about literally, will there be food on the table tomorrow, even if that is actually not a true threat. Even in the Depression, people lived and survived that time, and actually some people got quite wealthy. And unfortunately, that time, where Chiron was in Taurus, but we didn't know it yet, amplified the disparity, the wealth gap, and the disparity between the haves and have-nots. But people did make do with less, and there was a tremendous sense of mutual aid and exchange that kept people surviving. So in the collective psyche, we're going to hold that burden, I think, during this Chiron in Taurus transit. In the individual experience, what's important to recognize is there needs to be a reality check with the fears that our lizard brain is going to bring forth during this transit. It's very likely that the fears of your parents, if you grew up in a middle-class family, but there was always talk of not having enough, or your parents squirreled away all of their money and you actually thought you had less than you did because there was a sense of needing to hoard and prepare for disaster, which might have been a good strategy. Parents' generation were raised by parents who grew up in the Depression. So the idea of canning, of preparing, of squirreling away food and necessities just in case made a lot of sense. And what we're going to be invited to do is to not necessarily not prepare, because I think that there's in a certain level of preparedness that doesn't make us live in fear, but actually relieves the anxiety. So if you find yourself constantly, worried about the future or your job or AI taking it, or will you have enough clients, or, where is the next check coming from? And that puts you into a place of squirreling away and perseverating and thinking about these things all the time and putting an overemphasis. Maybe you're spending all your extra money on having more supplies. I know I went through a period of that during COVID times because I felt really unprepared during that time. And at some point, I think after a year of, investing in a lot of emergency supplies, I really had to tell myself, stop, that's enough. So there's going to be a check and balance process for all of us around those unconscious, ancestral in the psyche. We might notice them in our dreams. We might find that our mind is ruminating on those things during this transit. That is actually very real. And checking that with, do I have somewhere to sleep tonight? Is there enough food to get me through the rest of the week? Or if there isn't, is there someone in my community, in my neighborhood, in my friend circle who would help me if I needed it? Usually, for most of us, especially if you have the privilege of watching a YouTube channel, the answer is yes. And that's going to be the call, is to constantly return to, where can I focus on the well-being of the right now moment? Where can I see that there is enough and that I am medically safe? Unless you truly aren't right in this moment, which of course then our job is to get us to a place of assistance, of getting assistance and getting to medical safety. There's no denying that that is important. But staying in the earthbound reality and not getting lost in the Uranus and Gemini mind of it all, or the fear of the collective, Pluto and Aquarius, these are things that are going on at the same time. Illusions or the glamour of Neptune in Aries, because those three outer planets are going to be doing a lot during this transit, especially in the first initial years of it, as they're interacting quite closely with one another. We want to keep our feet on the ground, Taurus. And while historically, in the times before we knew that Chiron existed, Chiron and Taurus did reflect times of great economic hardship and revolution. The most recent Chiron and Taurus transit was from 1976 to 1984, which was associated with economic downturn for sure. And historically, Saturn-Pluto interactions have been at play as well. And we're about to have a Saturn-Pluto square in 2028. So there is a potential opportunity for healing around these matters that are going to come up for us. I think a lot of us will be extra concerned about the earth and earth-related Events, whether they're natural or man-made, are likely to be on our minds as well. So how do we cope with this in this initial dip? I'm currently working on a healing program that'll be available next year when Chiron makes its official permanent move into Taurus next April. But for this dip, let's focus on using a sense of what it's going to be like, which is what the dip is going to provide for us, and it'll give us a flavor of our own unique Chiron and Taurus journey, and how we can work with that in a way that doesn't bring us down, that doesn't mire us in fear, that doesn't paralyze us, or lead us to ruminating around scarcity and material possessions and wealth. Not that a certain amount of that isn't important, it obviously is for survival, and to not keep our bodies in a constant state of stress around, where the next meal is going to come from or how we're going to pay our bills. But ultimately, especially from a spiritual point of view, we're being invited to something larger than that. Okay, so here's the antidote. Here is going to be how we cope with Chiron and Taurus. One is gratitude. It is focusing on, I know you had heard it a million times, but I'm telling you, every day from June 19th till whenever I said in September, I think it's the 18th, where Chiron's in Taurus, I want you to write down at the end of the day things that you are appreciating in your life. Maybe it's the health you had on that day. Maybe it's the ability to go outside. Maybe it's the friends that you talked to that day at the mailbox. Maybe it's the love of your animal. My animal just moved up there quite abruptly. Focusing on what is working, the well-being that's dominant through gratitude, is absolutely the antidote to the Chironic Taurus fears. The second, I know it's trite, it's a trope, you've heard it before, but it's volunteering. It's giving and being of service. Using this time to even pick something you do once a month, whether it's, getting some groceries and getting them to your elderly neighbor, the next time you go out shopping, asking them if they want something, or actually a food pantry or a place that serves, people with disabilities in your community. I promise you that you will feel more grounded, safe, secure, and abundant if you do that, especially those two things in combination. So the meditation and reflection for Chiron into Taurus is, where do my fears around material resources come from? Family, friends, ancestors, and which ones am I ready to return to sender at this time? We can always do a give back with the messages, the core beliefs, and even the traumatic memories that come to us outside our lived experience in this moment. The mirror work for this transit: straight spine, deep breath, left eye. I am enough. I do enough, and I have enough. And your mantra for Chiron and Taurus is, I am safe to focus on the well-being that is dominant. Thanks so much for being here. I hope this was useful. Please check out my free resources below, including my free monthly newsletter where I cover all the upcoming transits. My booking link is down there. If you like this video, you'll like these two above. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.